All right. Hello, everyone. Looks like we're live.
Hi,
Really
Brian.
happy to have Andre join us today. How are you doing, Andre?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Yes.
I'm really excited to have you on the channel for the first time. Um, I'll just say I'm not the most knowledgeable with astrology, but I always appreciate when I watch Andre. He kind of dumbs it down so even I can understand it. So
Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliment.
uh, I'm a little astrology illiterate. So.
Mhm.
um, So anyway, so me and Andre are going to be looking at some political and current event um, questions. If you have any, go ahead and write them all caps in the chat. Me and him we had a long conversation before we even went live, so I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on. So um, I think what probably most everybody wants to know is Trump. You know, he's getting his indictments. Georgia's coming soon. Um, do what are you picking up on this chart like in August that's really kind of coming through for him astrologically?
Two words. Two words. Not good.
Not good.
For
I
for
agree.
him, that is. For him. For him. Yeah. It's not. It's actually the August thing. I remember mentioning it like late last year, early this year, because now this is in his case or anybody's case. It's really tied to an exact birth time. It's not like you
Mm,
need an exact birth time in every single case because you can often get, even if it's an
right.
approximate birth time and so forth. But in his case, it's to the minute, and I've verified it many times. And in August, there's this major, major change in his chart. Something happens that he's been in for the last, since 1985. So think about that. It's
Okay.
38 years, and it switches to a place that is not favorable for him. And it's curious that, we've already had one August indictment. There'll probably be a second one.
Hmm.
And even though he says, these indictments, they cause my base to like me even more and my polls go up. That may be true. It's just that it gets harder and harder, and there's more and more risk
Mm,
of people turning away, including now you're hearing some of his opponents, like DeSantis now is, under pressure. He said, of course he lost. And
he's walking a
2020.
very fine line though with that because he said he lost, but they shouldn't be investigating him for it. You know, so they're waiting. They're they're running a tightrope. You know,
They
being
are.
very cautious.
They are. And you may be right. For all we know,
Hmm.
none of them, uh, except for Chris Christie and a couple of others, maybe none
Right.
of them will attack him more. It's a possibility. Then the question becomes, is this the best plan for the Republican Party? I say
Mm,
it isn't. Even though some say, Trump has an even chance to win the presidency. I don't think his chances are even
I
at
don't think
all.
so.
But
I think if Trump got the nomination, it would probably be the biggest blessing for Democrats. But like I was telling you, how I was kind of intuiting it, I it's very murky to see who actually is going to get the nomination, and I think health comes into that.
mm,
Obviously, all of these investigations, which he's likely to appeal, but I could kind of see Trump getting the nomination, and then something happens with the health or um, one of these cases, and because I feel like with the Republican Party in general, it's kind of in disarray. There's a lot of chaotic energy to kind of like throw somebody in, but I also feel like with the takedown of Trump, he's pulling them with them. It's like the Republican Party imploding is how I intuit it.
yeah, yeah, and that fits. Yeah, that fits with how I see it. It's a period of time in history when really when you trace this to the root, to like what's happening here
Mhm.
type thing, it feels like a racial thing.
Yeah.
The aggrieved white, they call themselves the minority, which is preposterous because it's still a huge majority.
Hmm.
And yet it has the same feel as the 1860s when it was overt, we want to be slaveholders,
Yeah.
and the government opposed it, and it became this deadly conflict. And now it's more of a Cold War, but there's this attitude that along the same lines, because you see all these different patterns. Like, for example, think back to even when Trump was in power, they were constantly trying to defend things like when they were taking down the statues of General Lee and
Hmm.
getting rid of the Confederate flag, like things that are really offensive to racial minorities, but
Yeah.
Trump was trying to defend them. So it almost feels like we're back in the deep South in the 1860s. It's
Hmm.
just that that's not a good plan. Last time they lost that conflict, and
Hmm.
to me, they are setting themselves up to do it again. To
Yeah.
replicate the same problem, because even though you may say, "Well, he's got all these followers," yeah, he does, but there are more people beyond that are opposed to this. You know,
Hmm.
so in the end, you vote and then you count the votes, and those numbers are not helpful at all. I mean, this comes down to, by the way, in case anyone is wondering, the mechanics are pretty clear. It's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and then you have Georgia, North Carolina, Nevada, and I think one other state. There's one other state in
Arizona.
Arizona. So those are, and they got to run the table, right? So you
Right.
just need three. If Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania go
You're
blue,
good.
that's it. The other ones don't matter. So it is a much harder lift for the Republican Party to pull
Hmm.
this off. And so I feel like their game is weak. But in the meantime, yeah, it's pretty scary because you see the way this guy plays. I mean, he's relentless, he's cruel. He's always trying to incite violence.
Yeah.
And so,
It's really, I agree with that statement of the energy feeling kind of like the Civil War. We're kind of going through a bloodless Civil War right now, um, where everything's so divided. Um, where a lot of, I feel like, all the negativity that Trump has spewed on us in the Republican Party, it's really tough right now because we're learning so much from it, and it's really a great period of growth for us so that we can see and acknowledge it, and then we can finally move past it and put those rules and regulations in place so that we don't end up with Trump again or anybody like Trump. So it's really important, I guess, in that aspect, and also with our constitution of making sure that we put in these rules and regulations to safeguard our democracy.
I agree. I agree that often happens in history. Things have to break down in
Hmm.
order for there to be corrective measures. I mean, you remember back in 9/11 how
Yeah.
scary that was. And you do that once, it gets pretty hard after that because the security was really loose. Now it's perhaps too tight, but good luck if you're one of those people executing one of those plans because everything is on alert
Yeah.
to catch you. And it's the same with these types of attacks. The first time they happen, the system isn't ready to respond, but then it gets harder and harder. And then that's the whole idea, what you say, that you then try to, much like when someone has a theft at their home, then they put
Hmm.
in an alarm system to protect the areas
Hmm.
which were vulnerable, cameras, whatever, and then it prevents future problems. So you're totally right
Yeah.
that's the sort of meta principle, though, because you still have to go through it. I mean, this is the hard part
It's
for
hard.
people to accept, that uh, we've been in difficult conflicts before, and we came out on the right side of it, but not
Yeah.
without
It's
some
it's
difficulty.
not an easy lesson to learn. I always tell people the hardest things that we go through are those it's a challenging time, but it's those experiences that we learn and grow the most from.
Right.
Um, yeah, absolutely. And Trump's really that wake up call that I think a lot of us needed. Trump and then the pandemic. It's really kind of um, that wake up call so that we can see all the corruption and all the things that have been hidden in the dark. We can illuminate it, and then we can move on into a much better, lighter direction. Is how I kind of feel.
Yeah, yeah, that's entirely true. As long as you're willing to accept that,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean the problem is solved and then immediately things get better in politics and life. You could say definitely more so for countries than individuals. These
Mhm.
patterns, they last longer and they take longer to heal because
Yeah.
of the nature of things. So it could be a while, but that doesn't mean that we should all be worried about, you know, becoming a fascist state in the
Right.
next few
Right.
years.
I don't feel that at all. If anything, I feel a lot of really positive pieces of Biden's agenda getting passed through. Um, and it kind of feels like we're getting into a period too where we're focusing on humanity, rather than these rich individuals that, make all the money and have all the opportunities. It does feel like we're kind of going and shifting back to opportunities for everybody. And that's not something that's going to happen tomorrow, but I mean, it feels like a shift that we're going into, especially like around like I feel a lot of positive change in 24 and 25, but 2026 feels like it's like there's a lot of really positive movements. And maybe, we're still kind of going through a lot of the heaviness now, but there's still some positive stuff along the way in 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, well, there are major planetary shifts in
Hmm.
the 24, 25, 26 period. And they are, in one sense, dicey because of past performance, meaning
Mm,
like two of them were right there during the Civil War in the 1860s. And so you expect the situation to be dicey, divided, complicated. But then, after that, I mean, even back in those days, I mean, can you imagine if you lived in those days, how
mm,
crazy that whole theory was? And
yeah,
yet it was followed by not just years, decades of more progressive thinking. Like people were doing the right thing. They knew
yeah,
what the correct thing was. And this is almost certainly what will happen again. Now it's just that, we're dealing with all these people that he's starting with Trump. And I mean, look what he's doing to all the other politicians. They're actually, they're the party of law and order. That's pretty funny considering they're attacking judges and they're attacking the FBI and they're attacking law
right.
enforcement. It's crazy, at the moment.
Mm,
Everything is upside down, but we have a system, and to me, it's moving along.
yeah. I think the issue is a lot of us get a little impatient with things, and it's hard because we've been going through so much for so long. It's um, Earth Mama here makes a good point. She's like, I don't think we can move forward until the truth comes out. And that's kind of where we're at right now. 2023 to me is like the year of accountability and illumination, where we're starting to feel like we're getting some justice. Um, Things are moving ahead. And then next year, even more accountability. I think some people are going to be charged. So we're kind of moving through that stage um, where, all of the corruption, all of the lies are all being exposed and illuminated. And then we're dealing with that to go into this more positive shift.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you 100%. And yes, you will get some setbacks here and there. Overall, though, this is not good. I mean, the era we're in, in some ways, people say, well, now people get away with everything. Yeah, but the problem is there is DNA, there is, you've got, it's more for the criminal, but then you've got a lot of cell phones, cameras around.
Hmm.
These guys leave evidence everywhere. You know, they just leave the trail, and then people like Jack Smith or other great prosecutors, they just hunt it down. And then when you present that to a jury, good luck, with your case because it's not good. It's
Right.
not good.
Or you have a client like Trump that, he pretty much narcs on himself and everything that he has planned to do. I'm sure his attorneys are really hating their life with all of his public spews and untruth social.
Yeah.
He's definitely not making their job any easier.
By the way, there's a thing in the astrology that is it's coming to my mind now as
Yeah.
great description of Trump's peril, Trump's fate. When you look at in astrology, the Saturn in a person's life is, among a number of things, is how they organize themselves. It's both their limits and restrictions, but also the way they proceed, with a sense of order toward doing things. So it's really important in anybody's chart In a country's chart, the Saturn is the social order, is how the government, which is all of us, how we maintain order and civility, and we keep the country going. And the American Saturn is right on top of Trump's Jupiter. And
Okay.
that any astrologer would have told him, listen, if you keep pushing with your Jupiter, expand into all kinds of places which are inappropriate, the country's Saturn is going to come down on you, right?
Mm,
And that's exactly what's happening.
yeah.
And this is where in the 25, 26, 27 period, it's even worse because that Saturn gets activated, the energy of that toward Trump. So in other words, Trump's problems are not just now, they extend into next year, the year after, if
Yeah.
he survives
If he's
the
still
potential
around, right?
health thing, because there is health, there's enough health there, in his chart, enough threat that
Hmm.
could make the whole argument moot, and then it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, and that's definitely, I've been saying that on the channel. Every time I see him, it just looks like he's getting even more and more unwell, and that bad health really just kind of comes through really strongly.
Mm.
Um, and that's not wishing for it either, but I almost don't know if he's going to be with us around the next election to even worry about, maybe even shortly afterwards. Timing's always a bit hard, but I don't feel like he has too much time left on the planet.
Mm. Well, I mean, he certainly comes from the genes. His father lived a long time, but his father is known to have had forms of dementia late in his life.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I've often thought that, pondering Trump, because I'm familiar with this guy going back many years, and I have a hard time envisioning the Trump from, say, 15, 20 years ago. He would have thought that what he's doing today is crazy. It's just,
yeah.
it's completely out there and can never work. Same with Giuliani. Giuliani
I
is
was gonna
basically
say
drinking
Giuliani
himself.
too.
Yeah, he's drinking himself to death, and you kind of
Yeah.
wonder, like, are you crazy? You used to be a prosecutor. You were following logic, and you knew what charges were, and now he's totally on the other side of it, and
Mm,
seemingly committing more and more crimes as a result
yeah.
of his crimes. I mean, what kind of a plan is this? You almost wonder if they've lost their mind.
And I think that there's definitely some truth to that. I've said that myself. I feel like
Mm,
there's with Trump, and I can see Rudy too in the same situation.
mm,
Definitely something cognitively not right there.
yeah, yeah, exactly,
I have a
exactly.
question for you. Do you would it have can you look at like the chart of like the Republican Party, like when they started? Have you looked at that at all, or is that kind of hard to kind of because
I
it's so broad?
I did, and I just with charts, sometimes a chart will speak to you
Mm,
and reflect. Like for instance, the chart for the very first airing of Fox News. That chart is very interesting because it's really vibrating today.
mm,
You can see the fact that
right.
they had to make a
All
big
the
payout, all those
lawsuits.
things. But when I looked at the supposed origin of the GOP, it wasn't a chart that seemed like it was reflecting the situation. So then I wonder, could there have been something more important before that, or like what was the
Right.
actual founding of it? So that's one that no, it doesn't.
It makes it hard though too, because I feel like at some point, um, the Democrat and Republican principles kind of flipped parties.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, because you had the Democrats um, were from a lot of those southern states in the Civil War
Hmm.
that you know um, what's the word succeeded. So at some point too, it's like they flipped. I think in the earlier 1900s. So
Yeah, there was a shift there. There was another shift in the 1960s with the civil rights
yeah,
passage that flipped. But it is true that I don't know what is. That's actually great research there to see where the flip happened because by the 1920s, when the Roaring Twenties, there were Republican presidents who were taking the Mitt Romney approach. Everybody
mm,
should fend for themselves, and then the
yeah,
country, it crashes, and then 2029, and then when Roosevelt comes in as a Democrat, he brings in the New Deal, and is the idea of including more people. So there has to be a point in history that where you would see the flip because Republicans post the 1860s Civil War were the ones that were bringing in
Mm,
progressive legislation, and so
yeah.
forth. And then they became the party of business. So,
Mm. Um, what were you picking up with Mitch McConnell as you think with all of his health issues? I've said I didn't feel very good about it. And I said before with the fall when he fell that I did not feel like he was going to finish out his term. And I almost felt like more falls and more challenges with the health that were going to be really problematic for him. Does
yeah.
astrology follow that?
So you see, there's an example where a chart without a time. I don't have a birth time for Mitch
Got
McConnell.
you.
I look at the day, and yet it's crystal clear because he is really, really early in Pisces. And so Saturn enters Pisces in March, and right away he falls.
Hmm.
And it is entirely possible that he had an event that led to the fall, like a stroke or something
Yeah.
like that. And that pressure does not let up until next January, February. And the worst part of it is late in the year. And that period, I'm going to say October, November, December, January. That's risky for anybody. Now, in the case of a person who is basically healthy and so forth, because don't get the idea. Someone might hear this and say, "I'm an early Pisces. This
Yeah.
is no, no, no. It's not. Doesn't work like that. It can just come in as Saturn pressure around having to do something that you'd rather not do. Something you're catching up on or some work, uh,
Mm,
and so forth. But in his case, it's dangerous because of the context. His health is failing. He's also 82 years old. A planet like Saturn, if there are health issues, and you are in your ninth decade, because that's what the 80s is, it's a lot. It can put pressure. So
mm,
yeah, basically, I'm in full agreement with you. And it's not the only thing too. He happens to have, on top of being an early Pisces, he has a lot of Taurus planets, which means they're in the path of Uranus, going through there, and that's another complication to something like what he's experiencing. So yeah, there's plenty in the astrology map to feel nervous about his chances of getting through. And so then, if you're implying that he might not finish his term, yeah, that's a strong possibility. Let's just say
yeah.
that. Yeah.
And intuitively, I feel like McConnell very much is dead set on staying in. I almost feel like, it's either the health or, um, maybe the passing of him that would get him out of that seat. Because I don't think that he would leave, even with the struggles he's going through right now, unless absolutely necessary.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that totally, because I think when people are in a situation of responsibility, and we've all experienced this, where you
Hmm.
create some movement in your life and then you feel responsible to it. But I've always felt that with health, it's the absolute worst thing, because when you don't feel well, your best bet is stop, back off. I learned that when I used to be a distance runner, and it took me years to realize
Yeah.
when you've got an injury, stop. Just don't make it any worse. Pull back,
Hmm.
let the body recover. But it feels like you're on a treadmill, no pun intended. So you keep going and going.
Right.
And someone in that position, yeah, they start imagining that they're critical to the republic and whatever. But what critical? How good are you going to be if your health completely
Hmm.
fails? So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
he's just dead set on the control and the power, I think, because I feel like his wife and those around him really are like, you need to get well. It's time to step down, and he's not having it.
right. Yeah. Well, look to the end of the year. Mitch McConnell, his big test comes as we go into October, November, December.
Mm,
The Saturn energy, because Saturn stations then, so a lot of people will feel it
yeah.
depending on what part of the chart is touching. But he gets direct in the same degrees as his sun. And that's what
Mm,
astrology. That's what it works like. I'll give you an example of that. Okay, very interesting. Is I know people have heard of this, an actor that recently passed away, Mike Margolis. He was in, he had all these parts. He was in Breaking Bad playing a really menacing, horrible person,
mhm,
but great actor, right? Well, he just passed away. And again, a chart with no time, but you see the Saturn there. He has those
mm.
degrees, activated. And uh, his health was failing. And once the health is failing, those aspects are more threatening, when Saturn
Yeah,
goes
it's
through.
kind of hard to get out of
Yeah,
that pit when the Saturn's kind of over
yeah,
you, right?
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I got a couple questions starred. Those were some of the things that I kind of just wanted to touch on. And thank you so much for the super chat, Claudia. I appreciate that. Oh, I wanted to say too, is there anything going on universally? I think even more so like next month, because next month for me feels like it's a bit chaotic and crazy. Universally, definitely feel it with Trump and the Republican parties, but I almost feel like with Ukraine and that Russia situation, um, a lot of like heaviness, a lot of kind of chaotic kind of energy.
Well, it is entirely possible next month, although this month, if this month
Hmm.
would be like a close second,
Yeah.
like if you wanted to. But the interesting thing about that is Jupiter stations in early September, and actually for people that are for Tauruses, it's really
Hmm.
good. Not maybe perhaps not every single Taurus in the universe type thing, because there could be other planetary
Right.
things, but Jupiter is right in the middle of Taurus. So if you're in the middle of that sign, or in the middle of people born in Virgo or Capricorn, because Jupiter really helps those 3 points. So for those people, it could be a really great month. In fact, I've come across people who, without knowing the astrology, planned special trips around that time, which is a classic Jupiter move. You go and
Mm,
you expand your horizons, you travel somewhere. So it can be a really good feeling, but that it can also be a really difficult month overall. That's also true, because the thing with Jupiter is that in world conditions, it doesn't always help you.
hmm.
It can expand into mistaken
And that's good.
directions and cause
Yeah.
problems. Like, for example, back in when Jupiter was in Aries, the previous sign, that's an almost perfect fit for the inflation when it was really high, because Jupiter
Mm,
expands things, and the US is a Cancer planet. So if Jupiter's in Aries, that's squaring all the Cancer, and it's a classic. Things are over expanding and causing problems. Now it's improved because
okay,
Taurus
yeah,
for the
right.
US is better. Yeah.
Interesting. Um, let me see. I'm just looking through some of these questions. Leah posted a question earlier, and I just had my birthday a little over a week ago. But Leah wants to know if you have any um, advice for Leo.
On the spot. So wait, so you're a Leo? Is that
I'm
what
a
you're?
Leo, yes.
You're Leo. So, okay, wait, this is, I have to do high wire astrology here. So, do you
It's
know
been a
what?
bit of a challenging few months for me, so I'm sure there's something
So,
crazy going on with me astrologically.
do you know what time you were born?
I do. I can tell you just let me see. I have my chart here somewhere. I was born July 29th at 4:23 p.m. 1990.
July 29th, 4:23 p.m. So without night, I'll just do this. In this case, I won't enter the chart. We'll leave that for another time. But
Yeah.
so 4:23 p.m. So you're probably uh, you might be Capricorn rising.
I'm a
Or
I'm not Capricorn. I'm a Sag rising, Scorpio
Sag.
moon.
Okay, that's the previous. So that's the previous sign. Okay, so Sag or Capricorn. So Sag rising. So then Leo. You said a Scorpio moon.
Mhm. Yes.
So Leo. So well, the one thing I'll say is that because you're the first few degrees, July 29th. That's about maybe 8 degrees. You think about something Gemini. So Gemini on the other side, Taurus. Well, the only thing I'll say now is that you see the Venus cycle
Mm.
right now, it's in Leo, and it's doing a retrograde cycle in Leo, which is one of the reasons Trump's situation has run into a brick wall, because 8 years ago, Venus does this thing where it returns to where it was 8 years ago from any point you measure. You
Mhm.
could do it right this second and look 8 years later, it's back there. And Venus is it has a lot of influence over, for instance, relationships. It's
Yeah.
why statistically relationships last 8 years.
Okay,
On
that
average,
makes
right?
sense.
But
You say
but
like the 8-year cycles, right?
the 8 year cycle, yeah. So, but wherever it is, as it's happening, there's a kind of with Venus, there is a in retrograde. There's a going back over something. In your case, you have this the ninth for you because you're Sagittarius rising. Leo becomes your ninth sign. So you want to put out information, knowledge. It's a natural teacher's place. So going back over what you know, what you understand, retracing your steps, and sometimes rebranding too, renaming
Yeah.
or realigning what you're doing is what happens under Venus retrograde. But Venus retrograde tends to be very helpful to then really move things forward, much more so than say Mercury retrograde, which is more mundane and happens multiple times a year. The retrograde cycle of Venus is less common that way. And then 1990, did you say it was what was the July? So that would 1990, Saturn was in Capricorn. So then Sagittarius rising, Saturn's in Capricorn. Right now, Saturn is going through Pisces. So so right now Saturn is in your it's going through your place of home and residence and related to familial issues. But yeah, you have to calibrate it a little more. I'll enter it. I'll enter it in my system. And
Well, I'm impressed that you were able to kind of just do it a little bit on the spot.
yeah, no, well, the thing when you're if you're a serious astrologer, you like in your own lifetime, basically, you pretty much have it memorized where things were, and I actually use it a lot as an anchor for my own memories to like, what was the planet, and because then that informs me how planets work and the kinds of things that can happen, so I can in future dates,
Right, you can
get
plan
more information.
accordingly.
Yeah, exactly, and also because you would have been 1990, I think. Do you remember if your Jupiter was in Cancer or Leo? It might have been in the same sign as your Sun. That would be interesting to check out.
I
I'll
don't
check
know.
that out because that'll tell you a lot around um, where really positive things can come in around the
Yeah.
Jupiter. But this year, actually, it's interesting because you're Sagittarius rising. So Jupiter is going through your sixth. That's very good for your health and well-being. Even
Okay, well,
if you just decided to work on it and pay attention to it more, the Jupiter there can bring in blessings and new clarity and new understanding and things like that.
yeah, it definitely feels like for me, there's been a lot of the energies felt a little bit stuck. It felt like a little bit towards the beginning of the year. Um, like that manifesting energy was really strong and like that focus. And like the last few months, it's just like the focus hasn't been there the most, but it's also, it feels positive in a way that, spirit's kind of coming in and taking out the things that no longer serve me so that I can get to that greater milestone. So it feels like it's a bit weird, but it's been a bit heavy too.
Well, we should do it. I look forward to let's do a session sometime, and you
Yeah,
can
I'd love to.
you can read my whatever however you do it,
Yeah,
and then I can take a peek at the chart, and then you just get more information if you track a few more things and
yeah.
see the picture.
I
And
don't know if I'm sorry,
oh,
Andre,
no,
go ahead.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, like shifting onto some of the questions.
Hmm.
I don't know if there's anything in Trump's chart where you could feel like he would be silenced or like the communication would be off. People keep asking if he'll finally be gagged, and I said all along, especially with this. Uh, I don't remember her name, the one in DC. I did not feel like she was going to play. I don't know if I definitely feel like there's talks about quieting him because that protection order. I don't know if that's necessarily a gag order or if it goes that far, but I definitely felt like there's things being implemented to try to quiet him, but we know that Trump won't be able to control himself. So
Yeah, I mean the thing is, he is in a very volatile chart situation for himself because he has the Saturn energy. Is the Saturn is what tries to stop you, as you put it. You know, if you think of this is one of the things you do in astrology. Anything that you see in life, you try to
Mhm.
assign it to a planet or a sign. So when someone says, "Well, like what would rule a muscle?" Saturn. You know, you close someone's
Okay.
mouth so they can't talk. So Saturn is there, and it's there this year, next year, the year after. He's got Saturn up the wazoo. In fact, it gets worse because he's born near about 2/3 of the way in his sign. So next year and into 25 is when it's worse.
Mhm.
And that tends to limit you. But simultaneous with this, he is by nature someone with a lot of Uranus, which is the rebellion. I don't follow any rules. I just do what
Right.
I want. And that planet in his chart in the transit is very active during this year and next year. So he is just itching to crash through and rebel and disobey. You know, the idea of I'm not going to
Mhm.
follow anybody's rules. So that's a kind of a risky cocktail, you know, because
Yeah.
you said about that judge, she's known to be fair but pretty tough. So yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be great if she said, you know, if you open your mouth one more time, I'm going to put you in solitary
I
for a
don't know.
week.
I could definitely see her doing that. I almost feel like there would be steps before she got to that
Yeah,
point, and maybe that comes into like sanctioning him. Um, but I definitely feel like he's going to continue to try to push. I mean, that's what he does. Um,
yeah, no, there's no question. I mean, Trump's Trump's tactics. If you've been watching him for years, you just get to know his game. He's got a
yeah,
particular style, and he just keeps repeating it and repeating it. And it works really well when you can outspend your opponent, and especially in civil matters. It's a lot more tricky in criminal matters because
right.
then the penalties increase. They can
Hmm.
become really really lethal. So
Well, and we know how Trump thinks though too. Like, he thinks he's king. He would love nothing more than to. He's trying to rile up his base, again to cause all that chaos and fear, like on the sixth. I don't see it getting that far, but I mean, he would love nothing more than to have another insurrection attempt just to try to save
yeah,
himself.
yeah. But the only thing is, though, have you seen any indication of that? Because
Yeah.
uh, people, you have to give them credit. Everybody's watching more or
Mhm.
less what's going on, and they saw what happened to all those people that
Right.
went to the Capitol. So I haven't seen too many demonstrations. When you went to DC, apparently there were more reporters than Trump supporters
Right. Yeah.
outside the court.
I
So
do feel with the Georgia, I do. I feel like overall, like there's. It's. I don't see it turning into anything like the six, but I do feel like maybe there's some protests there that maybe get a little bit out of control. Georgia feels a little bit different to me, but it feels like there's like little scatterings across the nation, but nothing like like a huge insurrection or anything like that.
yeah, that would fit my that's the way I would understand it too. Approximately. So I mean, he's trying. That's his.
Right. Well, he's
That's
desperate.
yeah. He is. You can tell when a person is tweeting, truthing, whatever it is he does. It's so ironic. He calls this thing Truth Social, and then he
I
just
call it on Truth Social.
he spews lies, right? And he
Right.
puts everything in capitals. And yeah, but I mean, I'm amazed. What amazes me is that the judge doesn't say to him, if you mention me by name or mention anybody in this case by name one more time, this is your last chance.
Mm,
After that, there are going to be serious consequences.
yeah.
See what he does, because the fact is, isn't this kind of a thing? How you were saying earlier, where we're learning that the law should be equal for everyone. He's
Yeah.
basically saying, no, there's one set of laws for me, one set of laws for everybody else. Any person doing what he's doing now would have been in jail already.
Well, right. Right.
So, it's pretty unfair if you think about it.
But with this judge, I don't see her playing. I don't think that she wants to immediately arrest him. I think that there's going to possibly be threats of that, but it feels like it's, she's going to see. give him ample opportunity to follow those. And when he doesn't, I don't know if I feel jail, but I definitely feel like maybe some sanctions involved there. Any way to
Yeah,
get him set up.
yeah. No, yeah, you could see that for sure, no question.
All right.
No.
Somebody was saying they're thinking that Fani Willis is going to indict next week. And when I asked my guys, I was feeling around the 14th, which is a week from, is what's today? The 7th. So a week from today. So I was feeling more into next week. It could be the end of this week, though.
Yeah, it could be either or, and it's definitely, that's another one of those things that's in the range.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's due to happen. And the amazing thing, I don't know if people have noticed this. I try to track the news a lot, in part because it informs the astrology informs the news, and in part because I like to.
Right.
Ever from 20 years ago, I watch a lot of politics, and we learn all these things often way before they happen. And this is where people say, "Oh, the media, the media." The media is really good in the U.S. The ability of reporters to unearth information. I can remember information from December of 2020 that is being confirmed today, and reporters were, pulling it out of different sources. And so, in a way, it's out there. And they were telling us with Jack Smith, look what's happening. Now they're doing this, now they're doing that. It's about to happen. Boom, and then it happens.
Right.
And now the same thing again. I mean, they've got Georgia all roped off, and secured and so forth.
Coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
And we've been telling you all, I think, I think you included that, the summer and the fall was going to be really, that's when a lot of these indictments were going to start happening. I think this is his fourth charge in 4 months. So, and he's about to get charged again or indicted in Georgia now too. So it's not stopping anytime soon.
No, and someone said, by the way, interesting comment, that if he attacks the way he's been attacking, that Jack Smith can do a superseding indictment to charge him with tampering with witnesses, even if the judge doesn't do it, because when you're attacking Mike Pence like that to intimidate him, he's one of the people that is going to testify. So that's witness intimidation. So, things like that can happen, and he's kind of itching for it. And I would say, irrespective of the political argument, his chart is telling him, don't do this, pull back. But what's he going to do? I mean, at the moment, he's like a person that has been painting the room and now realizes, oh, I'm in the corner. What do I do now?
Well, part of him, I think, likes the narrative that he's painting too. It's that the DOJ is weaponized and the Democrats are attacking him, and he can be the victim in the matter. I mean, it kind of all fits in that narrative too, to incite people or build up that base. I mean, that's pretty much the only, for the federal charges anyway, any way he could get out of it is if he was reelected. I think he could probably pardon some of those charges. But I mean, I don't see that working in Georgia or New York because they're state charges. So I don't know. It's a lot of unprecedented going on with
well, that's like, I mean, if he gets elected, right?
But, right. Well, right. And I don't see that. So I don't think we have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a pretty big gamble, no matter how you paint it.
It's like that's like his only hope, though. I feel like, to get out of the charges.
Oh, for sure. That's why he's running. He's running to stay out of prison. Basically, that's his MO.
Yeah. I mean, do you have the judge in Florida? Do you have her chart, or do you know her? Have you looked at her at all?
Hers is, again, a no birth time. There's only a birthday available, and the way I interpret that chart is that she's gonna be in the mix. Like, basically, you just see that there is controversial energy going into next year. So it just feels to me like odds are that she'll remain in the mix. Okay. Whereas now, back when she was rebuked by the 11th Circuit because she was coming up with crazy rulings, you could see that coming too, because that was the Saturn hitting her really
Mm,
hard. Now it's not so much that as controversy and a kind of up and down energy and the odds of her being in the thick of things during this whole period. That's the most
mm,
I can point to.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just say Casey. She wants to know if Judge Cannon will be removed given the recent order she made today. I didn't see what the order was, but I did see some kind of I don't know if you'd say attack, but you know, an order that was kind of weird against Jack Smith. But I almost felt like she's removed at some point. Now maybe it kind of goes along with what you're saying, because I think we know that the focus is going to be on January 6th because she's just out to kind of delay things for right now. So maybe she's out of the mix. You said that you felt like she was going to be in the mix until spring or early next year.
Well, no, I see her in the mix all through the early part of the year. But
Mm,
remember, some of those aspects, like when I see a planet locked in and it's making an angle, it's my interpretation. Like one of the to say, well, the odds are probably that she'll be around, making
yeah.
noise. But it's not like any of those couldn't take her down too, because
Hmm.
one of the things when you see a chart with lots of action, and hers has quite a bit of action now and into next year, things can go wrong. By the way, there a lot of common sense applies, like meaning when you see people doing unwise things, then things can turn against them. Like this recent order
Yeah.
apparently had to do with something she revealed that is very inappropriate to reveal because it harms the prosecution's case, but she's not supposed to do it.
Mm,
And either she's being willfully in favor of Trump or she's ignorant, and neither would be a good
right.
thing. So I don't
I'd
know.
always I'd always felt like her and Trump had some kind of um, some deal, hidden deal. And but I did feel at some point, and it's kind of coming back to me now. I do feel like a man's kind of replacing her at some point.
Oh
Now
well, good.
maybe it's not happening this year. Maybe it just happen more into next year. I think, but I don't see you know, any of this favoritism towards Trump dying down anytime soon. And I do feel like more appeals to that 11th Circuit, maybe over this ruling too.
Yeah, it's entirely possible because part of it too is that if you just read it through Trump himself, that chart basically signals reversals.
Yeah.
Like although I mean, what he does too is so goofy. When he sued E. Jean Carroll, sued her for defamation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the judge said, "No, I'm not going to," and threw it out. But that the logic of that happening a lot in his life at this time can include Judge Cannon as well, because that case, by the way, is super important too. That a
Hmm.
president would do what he did there is, well, not an ex-president, someone who
Right.
leaves office and is doing those kinds of things. That is just beyond the pale. There was a time they would have executed you for that, for what he was
Mm,
doing.
right.
Because
Well,
countries don't take kindly.
and I think more information. Um, I don't think we'll get all the details, but um, I do feel like more information coming out about what he did with some of those documents. Absolutely coming out before the next election. So
Yeah, yeah, true, very true.
I see like the focus right now. It's going to be, I think, on the January 6th. I feel like that trial is going to be the quickest
Hmm.
and the most soon. I was feeling like either like end of this year, like December, or beginning of next year, um, for that trial for him. Um, but it does feel like with the January 6th, I've always kind of felt like indictments come in stages, maybe even more indictments coming in September, because like I said, September feels a bit crazy. Um, but and then eventually to maybe even some people in Congress that were involved with that too. It feels like there's multiple steps in with that, but Trump's case will be much sooner before the next election. I feel for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that I'm glad that your intuition is pointing that way,
Mm.
because it's really necessary. Do you see, by the way, what is your intuition about this thing with the his lawyer said this, but it's a total bluff that they want it televised, and immediately the Democrat says, "Yes, please,
Mm,
let's get it televised."
right.
There's no way he wants that televised. No
I
way.
feel like I definitely feel like there's energy around it being televised, but I do feel like challenged too, because I think we all know that if I think they would have to go to the Supreme Court to get approval to televise it, which I don't know if I feel the best about. But if it was going to be televised, that his lawyers would make a quick 180 switch on being for that.
Oh, well, of course. Yeah, no, this is the thing that is, it's like when he's saying all the time that they should test all the other candidates for drug use, and you think, really, Donald? Or like, do you really want to do that?
Yeah,
Do you want to do an extensive test of all the drug use? Please, it's just
yeah.
like
And
poke
Jamie said that countersuit against um,
was
E.G. and
denied
Carroll
today.
was denied today. Yeah, saw
Yeah,
that. All
yeah.
right. Um, Somebody was asking me, they were concerned about China and Russia being close to Alaska. Um, what's going on with that? I've I've said for a while, I definitely feel like there's a connection between China and Russia, and for me, it kind of feels like intimidation rather than like I'm not feeling like war or anything like that, but it's kind of just pushing the envelope to see how far they can go. Is there anything that you're picking up with China and Russia? I mean, obviously, a lot of craziness going on with Russia and Putin. Um, I see. I don't see that ending well for Putin. Or to me, Russia kind of feels like a revolution kind of energy within the next couple of years. China feels like it's that way, but it's a while out. Maybe 5, 10 years.
Yeah, well, China's more opaque. I remember that I didn't get a lot out of Xi Jinping's chart.
Hmm.
I can look again, see if it does something to my mind. But the one that is uh, pretty clear is Putin's.
Yeah,
Putin's gamble is that he's banking on Trump or a Republican, especially Trump, winning the election
right.
so that they will turn against Ukraine. The problem with that logic is that when you see the 2025, 2026, 27 period, Putin has got a block of planets in Libra, and Saturn's going to be on the other side of that.
Mm,
That's not a good plan. That's a great way
okay.
to walk yourself into a major problem, if he gets that far, which
Right.
is another question because Putin is another person that has stuff going on already. And just look at what's been happening. I mean, it's not an easy situation, but then in terms of a gamble, it's not a good gamble. I've said many times that Putin's chart was at its peak when he worked to elect Trump, which worked. So if he
Mm,
wanted Ukraine, he should have taken it then,
right
because
then, right.
probably Trump would have said, "Oh yeah, it's a land dispute," and
Well, we all know that Trump was trying, he was put in there, I think, to kind of destabilize our democracy, but also NATO and the NATO countries.
Mhm.
And I think that Putin was very shocked with even with Biden, um, how close all the NATO countries came together to
Mhm.
help Ukraine. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I've said for a while, I feel like he's very ill. And then you have to worry too about an uprising against him too, which we're already seeing. Um, and I feel like continuing to see that too. Maybe even into September. Like I said, if I was kind of intuiting a lot universally going on, and like you said, was it Saturn kind of amplifies the energy? So if it's not very good for Putin and Russia, that energy being amplified then. So
yeah, no, it's not. His situation isn't good. The matter of fact, the health angles are there. They're there persistently. As soon as
mm,
you see, it's kind of like the Mitch McConnell thing. If you don't
yeah.
see any health, then maybe you just say, like, look at Bernie, for instance. Bernie is the same age. He had a heart attack. He just rebounds. There may not be any reason to worry, perhaps, but maybe not. In McConnell's case, there's reason to worry. In Putin's case, when you hear and you see strange things that maybe there's Parkinson's, maybe there's cancer, that's
Mm,
worrisome because the aspects are like that. If they're there, and they're definitely there, right? And
mhm.
they don't get better, they get worse. So, you know,
One, I think too, um, a lot of his speeches that he gives, not necessarily him. I mean, they can have actors or people playing him to do that. There's definitely, I think, some body doubles there. Um, well, we've been on for about an hour. Is there anything that you want to touch up on before we wrap up for today? I've enjoyed having you on. I would love to do this again sometime.
Oh, likewise. That was fun. No, I mean, I think we've said quite a bit. I mean,
Yeah.
my message to everyone who I pretty much can assume if you're watching this, you're likely on the Democratic side,
Mm,
and you just got to stay calm, vote, vote all the time, every
yeah.
election, everywhere. Don't give these guys an inch anywhere. Local elections, you know, uh, state elections, and especially the federal election.
Yeah.
Let the chips fall where they may. They can say all they like about votes and all. They're going to get counted, and when they get counted, the odds are totally against them in terms of
Hmm.
winning these elections, and that's what has to happen. And that doesn't mean that things will be perfect, you know, at that time
Right.
or maybe even anytime soon. But you got to go step by step. You got to
Hmm.
defend the democracy.
And that kind of goes to what I was saying too, with um, using the hard times as that
Mhm.
motivation to go and make your voice be heard and to go vote and to motivate your friends and family. I'm in Ohio. We have a special election tomorrow. Um, we typically don't do special elections, so it was done this way to suppress the vote. But
Mhm.
there's this issue one where they want to change the laws for anything that we vote on to be a 60% threshold to get anything passed rather than a 51%. And it's because in November, there's an abortion um, thing I think that they're going to put on the ballot. So they know that they can't, even though they have a super majority, the Republicans here in Ohio in our state house, they know that, um, their agenda is unpopular. So it's the only way that they can get that banned put into place. So, but I feel pretty good about that. I do. I mean, Ohio's been kind of red, so as long as people come out and vote, I think that that's the most important thing, and I do feel like there's been some energy into that. So
Yeah, that would be. So when is that? That's tomorrow. You said.
tomorrow, yes, I
Wow.
early voted yes on Saturday. Yes, vote no on Ohio.
I mean, the only thing I saw with that, the one poll I saw, it was 58% were against what they're trying to do.
Mhm.
That's pretty tight. So,
Yeah. Well, and I do feel, I think an issue is they make these bills so complicated, and there's so many people that don't actually do the research. They hear
Mhm.
that, Democrats or these groups that they're against are voting no, so they automatically have to vote yes, but it affects their voting rights as well. So I think that that's why it's important to really make sure that you research these kind of bills. I think that there's a lot of misinformation out there, especially with this, to confuse people.
So is it that it's a bit ironic? So they're voting where the winning side will have 50.1, but they're voting that if that side says yes, then they'll turn it into 60, and if not, it stays at 50. Is that the way the logic goes?
Well,
Because
right, and really, if you're going off of their logic, to get it to pass, it should pass by 60%, right?
yeah, right. I know. I mean,
But you know
that's
what I
the
would
big.
say, even if this does go through, if anything, it's just going to continue to wake people up to vote, and I think
Yeah,
that that's what it.
that's
Sometimes
funny.
we learn the hard way, but
That's the best joke.
I don't feel like it's going to pass. So
That's the best joke I've heard today. Way to go! Because that would be the logic. I mean,
right, I mean that would be the
they were
logic, right?
decent, if they were decent people, which they're not, they would say, we're going to have this thing. And if 60% agree that we should have 60%, then we'll make it 60%. But how can you have 52% make it 60%? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it defies.
Well, and the thing that I don't understand why people don't get is um, clearly, you know, if the Republicans in the state house, if they're changing the voting rights things, even though that they have a solid majority there, why would they be doing that in your best interest? I mean, if you're a Republican, they're doing it because they know that their agenda is not popular,
Right.
and
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
can't get
Yeah.
it passed if people voted for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, Andre, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please
Pleasure.
do us a favor and hit that thumbs up, and please go over to Andre's channel, um, Astrology Alert, and subscribe if you haven't already. All right. Take care,
Bye,
everyone. See you
everyone.
soon.